Hi, my name is James Cabe at Fortinet, working along alliances with Tufin, specifically around automated attacks and exactly how malware in the darknet works. So essentially, surface web is everything that's actually trackable by a search engine. That's very, very simple. It's a great delineator right there, right? The deep web is everything that spiders from the search engines do not crawl. And that is a vast amount of information, because not just because people don't want to be crawled, but because anybody have an idea of what something that couldn't be crawled, any kind of website that might not be able to easily be crawled? Anybody in the audience? Nobody? Facebook could be a big one of that, right? You cannot crawl Facebook at all. All this stuff's completely active content. It's specifically bespoke to the consumer. Once you delete your little bitty cookie, all of your preferences disappear, essentially, if you can delete the cookie. Good luck trying to do it, but that's the way it works. So basically the deep web is all the stuff that's not crawlable, not easily, and it's mostly social media and a whole bunch of other darknet stuff, or semi-darknet stuff that's actually out there. The dark web is basically anything that's tunneled, right? So in a slide later on down the road, I'm going to show something that Fortinet took from the Hackers Conference Black Hat this year, and show you exactly what applications were actually run on that particular network. Anybody want to venture a guess what the top 10 applications, all of them were? All top 10 applications. Any guesses? Every one of them were tunneling protocols. TunnelBear, GRE, IPsec, everything that was actually out there, everything that ran a VPN, that was actually the full top 10 applications that were actually running on that network that day. There's a good reason for that. So if we want to dig deeper, there's actually a lot more classifications to the internet and the actual dark web itself. It goes to questionable sites like onion sites and things like that. Stuff that's semi-encrypted or not fully encrypted could be like hackers' websites and a lot of trading sites for malware, that sort of thing. So that's kind of all part of guessing. Now, why does this all matter, right? Why does the dark web actually matter to your organization, to other organizations? Well, cybercrime is now an economy. It's a full-fledged, gigantic, millions of dollars, or hundreds of millions of dollars worth of an economy. So what generally happens is people that are hackers are no longer hackers, right? What you do is, nowadays, you let a program do it. And this goes back to the automation story we actually have with Tufin and us, is that what you do is you get these little bitty nucs that people think that you're actually doing Bitcoin mining with. And Bitcoin mining is, unfortunately, sorry guys, is for suckers, right? And that's because you get these little Bitcoin mining machines and you have a decent enough algorithm, even with ASICs on the back of it, and you can actually go and crack a program pretty quickly, and that's called fuzzing. So there's application fuzzing, there's network protocol fuzzing, there's actually feature fuzzing for specific things on websites. So fuzzing is basically using a mathematical formula to have a bunch of computers just flip a single bit on a file. So if we were trying to hack Microsoft Word, I would take a docx file, right? And then I would actually keep flipping just one generic bit on it all the time, and flipping the bit back and flipping the bit, and just doing that billions of times, right? So it's like a bunch of electronic monkeys typing on keyboards to produce Shakespeare, right? That's exactly what fuzzing is, right? So every once in a while you'll hit something, and all of a sudden it'll fork something, segfault something, create a problem, and then you'll go back and have to analyze that in a forensics tool like IDA Pro, right? So when we take a look at it, it either splits off a user process and another user process, or it splits off a user process and a system process, or root. That's bad, right? That's what hackers are nowadays. People that actually are mathematicians that can run fuzzing applications to create the beginnings of malware. People call them 0 days. That's essentially what it is, right? It's a problem with a computer program that only you know about, and you can actually sell to malware vendors. Hacking teams over in Spain, they're probably mostly not there anymore. They're probably back in Eastern Europe where they originated from to begin with. And what they do is they actually create these tools like Metasploit, or they take the open source tools like Metasploit, which is an attack package, and they kind of put all this automation into it, right? They give you all the fuzzing attacks that they found that nobody else knows about, and all these other attack packs. And for about maybe 5 to 10 grand, you can actually be a super duper hacker that can get almost anything, like NSA level hacker. So if you buy one of these kits, right? But it's all automated, right? So anybody can punch a button and go out and attack something, even a CEO of another company, right? So that economy is what enables those sorts of tool sets to exist, right? Very similar to what your white hat, market looks like where we're at today, right? The same thing exists, but it's on the underground portions of the internet. So where is it? Anywhere you can run encryption, right? So it crosses the Great Firewall of China. It goes into other places, and it was built to do that by whom? It was originally built by the NSA, actually really by the Navy's research lab, and then pushed out into the NSA afterwards, after they did it. And that was actually specifically to foster along dissidents in foreign lands that wanted democracy. That was what the whole thing was for. It's kind of transmuted itself a little bit, huh? After that, there we go. You can actually they actually have some search engines for Onion routers. How can I access? I can download any of these browsers or any of these tunneling protocols. I can actually install, they actually have installables. If you're running DDWRT or some other open source firmware for your Linksys routers or D-Link routers, you can actually install daemons on them that will actually help you tunnel this stuff, right? So you can actually just install it on your router and have it running forever. So where do I get into it? There's all the URLs. This is the slide I'm talking about. So why do we care about all this stuff, right? Well, because we were at Black Hat this year. Fortinet actually and Tufin also, as part of a partnership, we were both at Black Hat, and Fortinet actually helps those people run the network operations of the network. We don't actually do it. It's a bunch of hackers actually running the Black Hat NOC. We provided all the equipment that runs Black Hat, all the classrooms and everything else like that. Fortinet actually gives out all the access points. They do all the next generation firewalls that pull it all together, because they don't even use switches. They used to use FortiGates as a switch, because if you Google FortiGate and you take a look at it, it looks like a switch, right? So they actually use FortiGates as switches to each one of the classrooms, so it all gets pulled together over a next generation firewall. So all the protocols for every port that's in the entire thing gets analyzed. Now, why do we do that? Not to protect each other from, protect them from each other, right? They could take a baseball bat to each other for all I care, right? What the big problem is, each one of them get their own sandlots to destroy things with, right? And to be able to segment things like that and do it in a business-like manner with a lot of policy around it, you require, our segmentation, and then to be able to do some business topology around the entire thing, you bring in Tufin after that to actually set it down on top of it, make business sense of it, and then if somebody goes and swings the bat for the fences and knocks out grandma's window, like many people do through something like AWS, right? They can give us a call. We can hunt down whoever's in the classroom using their newfound skills outwards to the outside of the world. So it's not about protecting the network. It's to make sure that network's not a blight on the planet for the short time that the Black Hat network is on the planet, right? So it's ephemeral. It disappears. And 99% of all the cloud traffic coming from Black Hat was all Amazon Web Services, because anybody with a credit card can dial up their own infrastructure in about 5 minutes, right? Same with Azure. Azure's coming. You'll see it's actually showing up on here. It's not as easy because they want to dial up thousands of nodes per second. Azure's almost there with that sort of thing. So, very interesting stuff. So, complexity is the enemy, and this is where Tufin especially shines whenever it comes to exactly what they're doing with their infrastructure, what they're doing with their policy management and everything else like that, because they try to turn it into plain business language for you and for your C-level folk, right? To make them very, very happy. And that's what it's all centered around. So what we want, first off, is to actually do some identification of objects on your network. Very, very simple through the Fortinet, FortiGates, and quite a few other pieces. Now, we stack that together because what we want is we want the endpoint to be working together with the firewall, and the firewall to be working with the switches and the APs, and we all want it to talk to each other either over telemetry or over API or over syslog and ATP, or advanced threat protection. Advanced threat protection, basically, it's anybody's endpoint client, like Carbon Black's a big Fabric-ready partner of ours. They can actually submit stuff directly to the Fortis Sandbox. The Fortis Sandbox then will take apart that piece of malware, get all the IP addresses for all that sort of stuff, for all that's actually hidden inside the malware for tunneling. It'll pull apart exactly what the MD5 hash is, and it'll take that hash, that signature, push it out to all the rest of the firewalls and the endpoints and things like that, as an IOC, and then also take the IP stuff for the IP reputation and push it up via API into our partners like Tufin. So then you can say, wait a second, I've got all these brand new IP addresses popping up from everywhere that bad stuff's happening from, because the dark web can be anywhere, right? So that's sort of the point. So if I can actually take these as an attack algorithm, and the stuff gets learned by stuff that's coming through my email filter, right? I can see an attack before an attack actually comes, because then I can actually start monitoring all my firewalls for outbound traffic to IOCs that I've actually just freshly found out about. Now that, to me, that sounds like a robot doing a lot of my work for me. And that's exactly what it is, because not many people can afford a SOC or a NOC with their businesses, and even if they can, it's an outsourced one. And do they pay as much attention to your infrastructure as you do to your infrastructure? Probably not, right? So the more of this stuff that you can automate and help out that remote SOC, or if you don't even have one, be able to help you out on your daily chores, the better that is, the more work you're going to get done, the more stuff you're going to find that doesn't get by you. right? So the Tufin Orchestration Suite consists of a whole bunch of stacks, but the most important one really, beyond the abstraction layer that I just talked about via the APIs, right, is really the security and compliance modules, right? What that means is there's a low bar for PCI compliance, right? On top of that, you have all these other modules that are actually specific to your business needs also. So not only do you know that you've got your PCI compliance covered, but then these are the other pieces as well that you can stack on top of it for your business needs. And that's essentially exactly what Tufin's actually doing for you in this particular infrastructure, right, and solution set. So the joint value proposition is, if anybody has NERC requirements, which is a National Energy Regulatory Committee, right? So anybody that's actually doing stuff like wind generation or natural gas pipelines, or even anything, anybody has like smart building going on, like anything with your HVAC that reports back again, and many of you do, but probably don't even realize it, there's actually a next generation firewall that can actually go in there that's actually hardened, right? So we actually have one that's Div 1 Class 2, which is actually literally, you could put it on the drilling platform of an oil and gas rig where there's like actual sparks would be a really bad thing to have happen, and you can actually stick that next generation firewall direct there on the drilling platform. So the idea is to make your visibility ubiquitous to Fortinet, then push that up to policy on the back end through Tufin, so you can actually make sure you can regulate exactly what you're doing, and then start some of this automation stuff, right? So workflow automation is exactly what it sounds like. The whole idea behind it is not to regulate you out of work, because there's already too much for you to do anyway, but it's actually to take the signal to noise ratio down, right? Signal to noise ratio, anybody that's an access point guy or wireless down here knows exactly what I'm talking about. Anybody who's an old radio guy or ham radio operators, signal to noise ratio means I have this big, I can push out as much power as I want to across an antenna, and I think I can reach everywhere, but I can't, because the more power I put behind that, the higher my noise rate is. So I can actually install all the firewalls and infrastructure I want to, but that actually just creates more noise inside my infrastructure. More and more noise all the time, right? So I could push as much power out there as I want to, but making that intelligible to me, a SOC guy, or any of your C-level folk, and actually being able to make sense of that becomes very, very hard with that signal to noise ratio. So the idea is, I want to be able to install filters that help me out on my day-to-day job. This automated response piece is, it takes policy that's set by, so if I see, I have a bunch of people monitoring a SOC network, or the SOC, or Security Operations Center, they'll go in and say, okay, I've seen this, this, and this 3 times already. Let's create a policy based on this, or let's create a business need or an action that automatically kicks open a ticket, or it does this particular remediation process, or it pushes out new policy to put something in a kind of not in full blockade, but it puts it in kind of a sandbox corner, like go telling a small child to go sit in timeout. It could do all this sort of stuff, right? So building an automated response into this lowers that signal to noise ratio for you for all the syslog monitoring and pieces like that, to let you actually filter out and see exactly what the real problems are in your network. So this makes sense to global manufacturers, financial institutions, anybody that has a very highly distributed network. The FortiGate firewalls are actually used to that sort of thing, otherwise we wouldn't have some of the hardened appliances we actually do. We're very, very used to it because, like I said, we take care of all the bad things for you. So we actually have customers that actually have 12,000 sites pulling back to our management infrastructure, one single pane of glass, and what pulls it all together and makes business sense out of it, because our manager is very, very powerful, but when you look at it, it looks like a science project more than it does like a set of business policies. Tufin actually sits on top of that manager and then makes sense out of all of it and lets you generate reports that actually make sense to your C-level folk and your V-level folk. So that gives you a lot of coverage and back coverage for yourself, and your ability to communicate with the folks that actually write checks for you to spend money with. So there's a lot of, it's global as well. I could actually point 10 out of 10 carriers actually use Fortinet. Tufin actually follows along with us to that managed service provider infrastructure. To be able to do that, it has to be able to scale huge and operate well all the time, otherwise you lose money, because every time you have to pick up a phone call and talk to somebody, that's the company losing money essentially. So being able to automate more of this and to be able to make it easy and simple and work all the time, that's kind of the rub. Why does this matter? Well, because of stuff like this, right? Stuff that you don't expect to have happen. Those sorts of attacks will let you watch this while there's another sideband attack going on, because in almost every one of these cases now with the big attacks, like the Microsoft Interactive Entertainment business, that was actually a sideband attack to try to get into the credentials of Microsoft employees on the side, right? So they were running this attack against them. At the same time, they were actually trying to get into their accounts when they were running the attack against them. So they were able to get kind of 2 skins for the price of 1, right? So even though they took the network down because they actually slow rolled denial of service attacked them, and slow roll denial of service attacks not this gigantic DDoS where you can see it coming in and going out again. You can't see that traffic. All of a sudden, you just look at your web servers and you've never seen any traffic on your NetFlow monitors, and all of a sudden you see this thing, all of my web servers at 100% CPU. Why, right? Why is it being overrun? Well, I guess a bunch of people are plugging in their Xboxes. No, they weren't. All those D-Link routers and those Linksys routers that nobody had ever updated and changed the passwords on, that Lizard Squad had taken all of them, installed their own little daemon on them, like the Tor Tunnel daemon, and then they actually became a member of this denial of service attack, so they were able to slowly open TCP sessions to Microsoft's back end, slowly and steadily, until they ate up all the CPU and horsepower. Crazy, huh? Being able to see those sorts of things going on behaviorally and actually having some automated response helps stop that, right? So they could have probably mitigated this early on had they had a little bit more automation in the back end and seen what was going on. Phishing attacks, Denver Public Schools, we're going to see a lot more of this and a lot more nastiness, and it's going to come, what do they always say? It's always an inside job? With public schools, it's always an inside job, right? So teachers are actually always asked or looked upon to actually become both help desk to the kids as well as their mentor and actually somebody that's actually going to teach them something. So a lot of these things that are that you have to do repetitively, the teachers have to do repetitively for students. This is the sort of thing that exactly what I'm talking about, especially when it comes to not necessarily the automation of a student be able to get on or get their tablet working or anything else like that. I'm talking about student can't get to resources. There's something that they actually can't do whenever it comes to policy management or resources that they've just stood up and can't get to. Tufin actually has the workflow to actually help make that happen, even on public schools. So you're not opening unnecessary holes to actually let the kids do bad things to each other, right? So the idea is to automate this infrastructure a lot more to where the teachers can actually watch and see what the students are actually doing to each other, to actually watch for that social portion of the hack, because 90% of your hacks, nowadays especially, are mostly social engineering, right? So regulatory compliance, I put this slide in here because I wanted you to see that all these policies are actually already in there, right? It's easy for you to consume them, it's easy for you to place them down on your network and then push them out and then get some solid management and reporting right as you stand it up. So there's like a lot of efficacy that comes in for you immediately. If you've got the visibility from the FortiGates, then you can actually push the policy from Tufin itself. So let me wind this up here real quick. This is my last slide. The idea and the reason why the darknet is what it is because it can be anywhere, right? To collapse the tunnels whenever it comes to this sort of infrastructure is the hardest part, right? Because you don't ever see the tunnels happening unless you turn on specific things. So one of the things I'm going to kind of leave this here that might be a little controversial. Has anybody ever heard of secure sockets layer MITM or man in the middle? Anybody ever heard of TLS man in the middle? Well, unless you're actually doing that to your own traffic, unless you're actually man in the middling your own traffic to actually inspect it, you're not going to find any of the modern viruses or command and control centers because they actually tunnel all that traffic either over the dark web or actually through simple SSL to a website that they've actually stood up in Amazon Web Service. So the idea behind this is unless you're actually doing the right kinds of inspection at scale through SSL inspection, and your firewall, next generation firewall better be able to do this, or you better be able to find a way that the next generation firewall can also do this as well. Unless you're doing that sort of inspection, you're really leaving a lot on the table and you may never find what you're looking for. So if you want the visibility through Tufin, you want to turn on this SSL inspection and then push that information out to Tufin to be able to actually mold it into a business case. Thank you very much, everybody. If you have any questions afterwards, I'll be available. Thank you very much.